There's a new channel that they're gonna make available next year called Fox. They like had a whole presentation, and it's gonna be some show called The Tracy Ullman Show and Married with Children are like the two things that they're gonna start with. And I don't understand. We have enough. We have movies, we have radio, we have the 3 TV channels. We're getting a 4th one, but it only has 2 shows on it. I don't understand why we're going down this road. ABC, NBC, and CBS are enough. We're gonna add even more things for people to get stuck in front of the boob tube. It doesn't.
Yeah. Does this channel have a special purpose? Like, is it a news network or?
No, that's the thing. They're releasing like 2 sitcoms, and one of them's got a cartoon with weird yellow people in it. I don't understand. What's the point?
And do we now see a new channel every year for the next 20, 30 years? Is that the deal?
Right, that's the thing I don't understand is like go outside. I don't why why do we need more TV? TV is already taking up enough people's time. A 4th channel seems unnecessary.
Yeah, go outside, people.
Exactly.
More time in front of a screen. It's not what we need right now.
No, not at all.
The Curse of the Bambino continues. So I'm not an American. I don't know when they last won the World Series, but that's got to be, 70-something years or close to 70 years?
Something like that. And it all comes down to one guy fumbling a ball. Like, is that guy ever going to live that down? That's just...
Is that Buckner? Is that his name?
I believe so. At this point, they're just never going to win a World Series. Like,
yeah.
It's a citywide pandemic of faith and skill. I don't know. It's never going to happen.
How was your year? It's 86. What movies did you see this year?
I didn't like Aliens because it was like a weird action movie. And that was not what... Alien was so great because it was a weird, suspenseful horror kind of like one woman stuck alone. And Aliens is this... I don't know. I don't get what they were going for there. It was... I'm not a huge fan of these sequels.
Yeah. Can you ever get better than the original? I can tell you the original, the moment in the cafeteria with John Hurt will never leave me. There was nothing powerful in Aliens like that, but I got to assume, it's almost becoming like a franchise right now.
Is that what we're turning into? Like, this isn't Empire Strikes Back. It's not better than the first one. So I don't understand why are we doing this? Like, at least Star Wars had like a story to tell. This felt like a cash grab. I did like Flight of the Navigator. Flight of the Navigator was adorable, and now that's the kind of thing. If I don't know how you'd make a sequel out of that one, but I enjoyed that world. I enjoyed that spaceship. That ship was really cool. I liked that one.
Flight of the Navigator, probably one of my favorite movies for the year. I agree. Really good movie. Good call out. Flight of the Navigator. Short Circuit as well. I thought that was...
Johnny Five. Johnny Five. There is something you should make a sequel. Johnny 6. That you should absolutely...
Well, would it be Johnny 5.5? Do you just jump to 6?
0.1.
Is it? Yeah, because I know often in software they'll do like a number, point, a number, right? So maybe it's Johnny 5.5.
There you go. Johnny 5.5. But then he's only half better. That doesn't... I don't know that I want Johnny to be fully sequel better.
Okay, Johnny.
Although not Aliens better, right?
Maybe he's Johnny X.
Oh, man. I hope we don't start naming things X. That would be terrible.
That seems like a really terrible name for a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and ugly of how computers get made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the recording studio from me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. We're also here to get deeper on the human elements. I could go on for an eternity about people and how they think about the process of building complex systems, and I can't think of 2 better dudes to get into it than Kevin and I.
I agree, we're pretty rad. On this week's episode, we're taking a look back at the year and some of the bigger news stories and trends that we didn't get a chance to really dig into. 1986 was a crazy year, and there's a lot to go over. But first, a friendly reminder that we are always interested in hearing questions directly from you, our listeners, for our segment User Stories. If you've got a scenario you'd like help with, whether it's working with an engineering or product team member, trying to figure out how to solve a waterfall process problem, or you just can't understand why your favorite 16-bit game updated everything and it's now terrible, we're here to talk it through with you. You can log into your favorite listserv and send those questions via electronic mail to acceptancepod@gmail.com, and we might be able to help on a future episode. And we're happy to keep it anonymous so no one can trace it back to you if you end up crap-talking a coworker or something.
That was such a choice intro, dude. It's hella good.
But before we get to all of that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
Take off on the ride of your life with the best of the best.
We're gonna have a good time.
2 hours of pure pow, says People Magazine.
Rock and roll! Goodness gracious, great balls of fire!
Tom Cruise,
Just want to serve my country, be the best fighter pilot in Navy, sir.
Top Gun, rated PG.
Now playing Man National, Westwood Man Chinese, Hollywood, and a Theodore Drive-In near you.
All right, welcome back. This is our year-end review episode, so we'll be digging into a number of things that happened in 1986. I think this has been a year of really bad disasters. So both Chernobyl and the Challenger explosion, I'm kind of worried about we'll get into some of the cool, interesting sides of tech, but 1986 this sucked. This was some bad failures of what seemed to be pretty reliable technology.
Devastating.
Yeah, let's start with the less serious. I shouldn't call it less serious. That really diminishes them. But I feel like one is going to potentially end our planet.
And then there's Chernobyl.
So the Challenger explosion, you got to hope after Challenger that, can this ever happen again? I got to assume NASA just fixed whatever it is that failed there. There's a lot of reports coming out. It's process failure, communications failure, not only along with the technical failure, but you got to assume like an agency like NASA that is based on public opinion and government funding, surely they can never have a disaster to this extent again.
Well, but that's going to require a change in incentives. So I think Congress had a fairly damning report at the end of the year here talking about, quote, the pressures within NASA to attempt to evolve from an R&D agency, research and development, into a quasi-competitive business operation caused a realignment of priorities in the direction of productivity at the cost of safety. And I think that's indicative of the direction this country is headed in. Reagan has been pushing for, the scariest words in the English language are, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help or whatever. Like this idea that these government institutions that have been stable and doing amazing things for the past 20 plus years, getting us to the moon and getting us into these shuttles, and this switch to, have it be a productivity profit-based solution. Of course a space shuttle exploded. That's what's going to happen when you put profit and business goals over science and safety. It's crazy.
But do you think then, are you saying that by becoming a business and commercializing that the safety, the expectation of safety is less? Surely not, right? I mean, we're talking about astronauts' lives.
And yet that's what Congress is saying, is that they started rushing decisions because it was more important to show, hey, we can get 7 missions per shuttle and there's, 6 shuttles. And like they really wanted to turn it into this thing that looked productive. And, if your goal is to, look like a business, and the goal of a business is to impress your Wall Street investors and to appear to be doing constant new growth, interesting things, and you are coming from a sector where, okay, so yeah, the mainframe system doesn't get updated, and so every once in a while a financial transaction gets screwed up. Who cares? For them it's a rounding error of a couple $1,000s, but here a single thing goes wrong and it kills 7 people and puts the entire trust of a fairly important government entity like NASA in public doubt. It's not a good trend.
And it'd be interesting then, do you think the private sector ever gets more involved? Like, does it ever become profitable for the private sector to contribute to the goal of NASA?
I think that's what we've seen, is that they've started to go and say, okay, well, we're going to do a bid to this company out in wherever, and they are the ones who can provide the pieces and the thing. They've been farming out NASA for a couple of years now. And I don't know if that was true in the Apollo mission, to be fair. I don't know if, the Saturn V was partially built in California, Texas, Illinois, and somewhere else, or if it was all under NASA control. But the report from Congress seems to indicate that they were making these choices and letting businesses do that. And I don't know what that does to incentives, I guess, is the thing. Is like, even if you have a business who's like, hey, we produce the best, most amazing, I don't know, what's the little arm that comes out of the back of the space shuttle, and they do the hinge that does that, and they're the best company in the world at making these little hinges, sure, there's probably some benefit to that. But if that company normally is like, yeah, if the hinge on I would hope they're not, the hinge on the crane fails and the crane drops the tonnage of thing on the people below, that's probably bad too. too. So you would hope these companies have these incentives.
But that's the past. Do you think we ever see private sector? I mean, NASA don't own the sky, right? NASA don't own space. So is it ever profitable for another company to step in and say, thank you very much, NASA, we'll take it from here? And it's not really a NASA initiative anymore. It's actually a private sector. And then what would be the benefit to a company doing that?
I have to assume that there's a reason that governments are the only ones doing it. Like, we have the space race between the USSR and the United States because it's such an expensive prospect. What company makes enough money that they can... Because that's the other thing, is NASA is failing very rarely because they take the pace and the time to do that. What company, one, has enough money to match that? And two, are your investors, is the stock market going to be okay that, like, NASA says, well, we're going to launch when we launch? Most companies don't do that. Most companies say, we need to launch by Q4 of 1988, and anything that we need to do to get to that date is the date we told people that we need to do. NASA doesn't work that way. I don't think the Russians don't work that way. I think these things have to be at a government level where you don't have those pressures and you have the funding. Just companies aren't worth that much money to set aside, oh, we can go spend $500 million, and if it blows up, that's okay. What investor is okay with it blowing up?
And this is coming up the back of a year when the Russians obviously set the Mir space station in process, right? So it's been a tough year for NASA. There's not too many years you would look at the USSR and say they've competed. They generally don't have the big year, but the Challenger is almost like concedes the big year to the USSR, which will be interesting to see what the political knock-on effect of that. And obviously, we'll get to it in a few moments. But the USSR has other challenges. But yeah, the Mir space station just seems like we're now behind again. Is that right?
It seems like it, right? Yeah. I mean, an actual place that human beings can be up there permanently. And I mean, I think this is one of those interesting areas where we actually do kind of every once in a while secretly have our scientists like partnering, like physics send a bunch of things that the Russians figure out and that we figure out. The physics are what do I want to say? What's the word? Not physicians. Physicists. The physicists, folks like that, kind of still do a bunch of international cooperation. So I'll be curious if the word Mir is peace in Russian. So I do wonder if there's going to be any kind of shared scientific understanding from the stuff that they can do in low Earth orbit as, scientific endeavor. But yes, it's surprising that we're not the first to do that.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point. Like the two agencies are working much closer. So some of the modules of Mir, I know that NASA was involved in the transportation, and some of the launching of Mir's components were from U.S. facilities. So it'll be interesting to see, are we in a new dawn then, where we're super competitive, but we're sharing just enough secrets that we can progress? Is this like a new dawn for humanity?
Right. I mean, and yet at the same time, the Berlin Wall is radically enforced, and any state secret between countries is, I don't know. It's a weird thing where science is kind of leading the way, which is kind of cool, actually. Maybe that's how you eventually get to the USSR opening up a little bit.
Yeah, I used to think the Berlin Wall was just a metaphor, and then I went to the library one day and I saw a picture of it, and I realized I was like, oh, it's actually a wall, a physical wall.
And it's weird too, because like Berlin is not in West Germany. It's its own, like West Berlin is this weird little enclave stuck in the middle, and we've somehow secured like air corridors to somehow get us over there. The Cold War is weird, man.
Yeah.
I don't understand what we're doing here.
Yeah, somebody's really got to bring that thing down. It can't be great when you're shopping.
Right, exactly. Oh, damn it. The carrot vendor is across the wall.
Yeah, like that's where my favorite restaurant was, I haven't been there.
Exactly.
I haven't been there in 30 years, but it's right there.
They make the best donuts. Damn it.
Although, I guess if you have a contact on the other side, you could just do a bit of swapsies, right? Throw a couple of bags over late night.
Right. It's never suspicious to the guards on the wall that they're, having packages thrown across.
Well, depending on which way the food is going, you can always be bribing the guards with better donuts, right? So,
there you go.
Which guard doesn't like a donut? So let's get to the big news out of the Soviet Union, and I think this is going to destroy the Earth? That's my fear. I go to bed at night and I'm not sure. Chernobyl disaster.
I mean, we're already under the constant looming threat of global nuclear annihilation, and we're also now adding in, turns out you can, have one of our power plants melt down, and it's not just like, the Hoover Dam explodes, it's bad, and probably a bunch of people get killed, but it's not permanently making southern Nevada uninhabitable. Like, nuclear power, when it goes wrong, is really bad. The other thing that's puzzling to me that I didn't really realize until now is nuclear power is just steam power. Like, we're still on the steam engine from the 1800s. We're just using a different way. Instead of burning coal, we're letting nuclear rods do something to heat water, but it's really just steam power. That's mind-boggling. We haven't actually figured out how to harness the energy of these nuclear reactions. We're still just boiling water. How is that the possibility? But then, I don't know. I'll be curious if this has an impact on global energy developments of whether or not nuclear is really safe, if this is the kind of thing that can happen.
And it's impossible to get any decent news. Like, I think I've read the same 20 newspapers over and over to try to get any kind of news. Like, what is the risk here? What's the risk to my family? What's the risk to me? Like, can I drink the water? Can I eat the beef? Right? Like, what's the deal?
Well, and I would hope, again, that we were just talking about the scientists sharing information. I would hope that if there are things that they're going to learn out of this, if there's a part of the technology, if there's a part of something going on, we don't know enough about how Chernobyl was built. Maybe they build some weird, crappy Soviet version of a nuclear power plant and all of ours here in the US are fine. But if there's some fundamental software malfunction going on, I would hope that that's information that's going to come out, at least to physicist, nuclear engineer to nuclear engineer across the Iron Curtain. It's crazy.
Yeah, and going back to the Mir space station and the collaboration between space agencies, is it compartmentalized? Like, do we have like collaboration in the space and science sector, but then when it comes to nuclear power, because I'm talking to a lot of friends who are telling me that what happened is not totally clear. There's not a lot of forthcoming news. There doesn't seem to be like an honest approach to the timeline of when these things happened, and God knows what happened to the people who worked there, lived around there. Like, how many people live in this place Pripyat? I don't even know how to say it, but how many people live
Right.
there? Like, what's the deal? Like, how many people died? How many people are going to die? And like, what about the rest of us? I really don't want to grow an extra head. Is that the
Right.
risk at this point?
Although, would dogs be cuter if they had two heads?
Oh wow!
Right?
That-
Right? Maybe there's some secret side benefit to this.
Yeah, that was both creepy and cute. Like, yeah.
Atomically adorable.
Well, so I also wonder, just like the International Atomic Energy Agency is this thing that we have to try and internationally manage and monitor and be aware of this kind of stuff. And yet I don't think they get very far in the USSR. And so we have this whole international framework making sure that, France and us and Great Britain and a bunch of people are participating. But if the giant, massive nation that spans from Europe to the Pacific is not participating in that, then international standards aren't going to help us very much.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, right? Because we can't get too much into politics here, but there's got to be an element of pride, right? You're a superpower.
Sure.
You've got nuclear weapons, you've got nuclear power plants, and one melts down and impacts the entire Earth. You probably don't want to let those other agencies in, right? You want to control the narratives, and we know the Soviet Union likes to control the narrative. So yeah, it could be a while before we get to the bottom of what really happened, and then by that point, maybe we're all vomiting yellow stuff, and we have two-headed dogs. We'll see. But it's
Right,
also,
no.
do we see this change in nuclear power in the future? Like, is this a warning?
Yeah, it's super scary, and I don't think, because we don't have enough information coming out, it's hard to know. And I don't think our government is doing a great job being like, Reagan coming out there and saying, oh no, don't worry, all of our plants are great. It's like, well, okay, did the Russians until a couple months ago think all of their plants were great too? I mean, that's the other problem I have is, if your populace is standing in 8-hour lines to get a loaf of bread, and the system over there isn't doing great, then I don't know. It makes me wonder just the stability of an entire regime that has world-ending capabilities and a starving populace, and who knows how the USSR continues to function.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. We had the 3 Mile Island accident, right? Was that back in 79?
Yeah, see, I was under the impression that, it was bad, but it wasn't Chernobyl bad. Like, we
Wasn't
don't have
Chernobyl
parts
bad.
of... No, right? Like, we don't have... I think it probably paused a bunch of our development of additional nuclear power plants, but
Yep.
I don't know.
Scary times, because we're surrounded by these things. And all it takes, apparently my friend who knows about this stuff, all it takes is a bit of wind, and we're all doomed. So you heard it here first. If the wind changes,
good.
we're doomed.
The wind changes.
It's
Okay.
pretty much as simple as that. If the wind changes, we're doomed.
Global annihilation.
I wish there was a place we could go read about nuclear power and like too much work to go to the library and check out a book.
That is the problem, is the Britannica sales guy shows up and offers you, 700 pounds worth of encyclopedia pages. And as soon as you get that, it's now out of date. Like the encyclopedia my dad bought from Britannica does not have anything helpful about Chernobyl in it.
Yeah, and it's like you're fighting with a friend on the phone, and you're like, "Wait a minute, I'll be over there in 20 minutes with my Ada F," and you got to carry two volumes over there just to have a fight and prove to him, like, "Hey, look, it's in my encyclopedia." That just doesn't seem efficient.
No, even small stuff like if I could just have a way to look up some of that information really quickly, it'd be really nice.
I got one of those genius friends. I just phone him on the telephone, and
he just remembers everything.
Yeah, it's like, my guru, my information guru. So what is going on in the technology world, other than the doom and gloom that we started with? Is there anything exciting and happy in the technology world?
I mean, it is sort of, not quite on the same stakes as the US versus the USSR, but we do have sort of a PC versus Apple war brewing. I think we had, the Apple Macintosh Plus, which is the third in the sort of series of successors to the Apple II, just got released this year. It's pretty impressive specs. It's got a megabyte of RAM, just like more memory than you're ever going to need, and it's only $2,600, which is like a surprisingly low cost, and I think it's like really impressive that Apple is maintaining the ability for these to be, that's not affordable for everybody, but a good chunk of the middle class to the upper middle class can start to afford these computers in their homes at that price point, and if you save up for it. But that's still, compared to the, other thing, the IBM PC convertible laptop, and Compaq did something called the Desk Pro 386, and that Desk Pro 386 was $6,500. Like, Apple is winning the cheap and affordable war, which is pretty impressive. Although, I guess I am going with a war metaphor, so I haven't quite moved away from the doom and gloom.
But what am I gonna do with a PC? What am I gonna do with what am I gonna do with these things? My homework?
No, I mean,
letters,
that's the thing.
Resumes.
I do think that there's a degree of creativity. So, I don't know, there's some interesting stuff that you can, if you are a writer or if you've got a novel in you that you've always wished you could write, and like the typewriter is great, but if you make a typo and you screw it up, you have to retype that part of the page, you have to do weird stuff. Like, the typewriter is not actually great for a writer. And some of the really impressive stuff that you can do on these things, where you can just save the digital file of what you're writing, and it does a lot of really handy word processing capabilities. I think it's also some of the games. I don't know if you've ever played like a Commodore game. There's actually some really fun. There's the little guy who goes and fights the monkey at the top of the ladder, like as a little thing to pass some time as a gaming thing. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I get the gaming element. I played some of the games. When I think about like that extent, like to pay that kind of price, I'm thinking Mario Puzo wrote one of the greatest books of all time on a typewriter, right? Like, am I really good? I guess I'm not a writer, so I don't see the efficiency. Maybe for them, it's like, okay, this is going to help me when I do make a mistake. Like, I'm not familiar with all the terminology that they've got for this stuff. But yeah, I will say the gaming, I've seen some of the Commodore stuff, pretty impressive, like being able to play a football game on there, some of the sports games, and it's kind of interesting. I could see that. But for the price tag, it's going to be such a select few people that can afford to have a machine in their home, right?
I guess, but also I think, so I do think as more things move onto the internet, so my mom checks her electronic mail from work and has the ability to have people send her things, so that, I mean, I don't know that she loves the idea of being able to check something going on at work at like 6 p.m., but I think there's an interesting part of what can you do from home, and you don't necessarily need to always be in the office doing the commute. One of the really cool things was the printer that she hooked up to it, and you could actually like get the her recipes that she prints out now. It's not all like these handwritten note cards and stuff. There's some really interesting applications for people who want to take advantage of a more digital world.
Cool. So now, even when I'm not at work, I am at work. So they can reach me. That does not sound like a good life.
Yeah, but computers are just part of our life more and more. So if you want to get a job in one of these spaces, wouldn't it be great as a high school kid to have a place that you can go and learn? Like, there's different programming languages. There's something called Microsoft Basic, which is apparently a really easy way that you can program things. And that runs on both the Apple and the IBM computers. So the idea that kids who want to get into this industry now they don't have to go to college. college and wait until then. They can start learning this stuff earlier. There's some really cool stuff. Apple's talking about a thing called HyperCard where you can go and create these really cool visuals. I don't think they're going to release it for like another year, but there's some interesting stuff to enable people to get more familiar with these computers that are showing up everywhere.
That'll be interesting. I wonder if that's going to be the death of the artist then. Are we going to start seeing a bunch of people who are not really necessarily skilled at the classic art, and all of a sudden they're good on a computer and they're creating artwork? And
I don't know. I saw some of the demos of what HyperCard is trying to do. I'm not sure that that's art that's really going to replace anything sometime soon. Though I will say, Steve Jobs left Apple last year to go create some company called Next Computing. And I mean, Apple seems to be doing fine without him. I'll be curious if what Steve Jobs goes and does next goes anywhere. But one of the things he did do was acquire a company called Pixar from George Lucas, the Star Wars guy. And this company called Pixar has this kind of machine that apparently uses like lasers to make digitally animated movies. And so I do think that, you know, maybe not the home person trying to replace artists, but the idea that we're going to have a computer draw our movies for us. I do think that there's an interesting, like, what's going to happen to the animators at like Disney. Although most Disney movies these days suck, I think they probably are due for a renaissance. But the art style and ability of a computer, I can't imagine is going to keep up with what a human being can do. But Steve Jobs is determined to try.
yeah, it's interesting. Steve Jobs seems to be doing well. Apple seemed to be doing well without him. So maybe he wasn't the inspirational factor at Apple after all. A lot of people are sort of saying there is no Apple without him, but apparently there is.
No, they've had a really good year this year. I think they are, you know, getting into people's homes and they're the cheap option, which is great. It's getting people access to everything in a way that PCs just aren't.
I guess you could say there were no shortage of jobs.
Oh gosh, do we have to though?
Dad joke.
Yeah, and you mentioned George Lucas. It'll be interesting to see, where does Star Wars go? Is it done?
I mean, I have no idea why they decided that all of a sudden it was episodes 4, 5, and 6, and there's a whole thing. So yeah, supposedly there's some kind of earlier, what's episodes 1, 2, and 3, some kind of sequel. What's an early-quel? I don't know. They're gonna have to figure that out. But I can imagine he's already pushing the limits of what's possible. Maybe the next Star Wars is animated. Maybe it's Pixar doing all of that for you.
And you mentioned Disney sucking. Can we talk about Disney sucking, and where do they go as part of this big technology revolution? You think animated movies made with partnerships with companies like Pixar, did Disney go and buy their own version? Like what how does this impact Disney?
I mean, this is the thing, is Disney is so tied into the human elements of the Imagineers and the people who do all of this, and like they are famous for the fact that they have these artists doing all of this kind of stuff. I mean, the Great Mouse Adventure, whatever it is, like I haven't loved a bunch of the recent Disney movies. I don't think they've been as good quality, but yeah, I do wonder if that's a route that Disney needs to go, is to say, how do you revitalize a fairly, you know, slowing down brand? But it does seem antithetical to just what Disney does. Disney has always been about the people doing it, and so some machine that draws with lasers sounds cool, but I don't know that that's a path that Disney actually wants to go. Maybe it's the only solution for them, but yeah, I don't know.
Digital Renaissance.
And you previously you mentioned something called electronic mail. You were saying we can get electronic mail in the home. Let's talk about that for a second. Are we suggesting that the physical mail that's delivered by a postman is going to go away?
I can't imagine you're going to do that, because it does feel like a very business-oriented thing. I don't know that a bunch of people are going to stop writing, you know, letters to grandma and grandpa and sending postcards and doing all of that kind of stuff. Everything I've seen about it is very company-centric, but it does seem to be, you know, rather than writing a memo and then having that go to the mailroom and then they go and make 1,400 copies and they deliver it to everybody's inbox physically in the headquarters of the, you know, office building. If you can do that electronically and you can have the person just type up a quick note and send it out to people, I think that's going to have a bunch of impact on how business works. I don't know that, I mean, grandma and grandpa are lovely people, and grandpa has gotten super into like the, what's that Leonard Nimoy show? Grandpa got into really out there alien conspiracy stuff, but I still don't see him even embracing this very weird. Like he would need to have a computer. I don't know. I'm not sure I see that. But it does seem like they are continuing to improve the way that this electronic mail is working. So there's Eric Thomas is a French student in Paris, and he released something called Listserv, which basically helps people subscribe to these different electronic mail lists. So people are trying to say it can work outside of corporations. People can take advantage of this. And I know, there's plenty of like fan spaces where people go and want to talk about, Star Trek and stuff like that. And they're on, actual mailing lists, and they get things sent out to them. An electronic version of that might be easier and cheaper. You don't have to print out, 1,000 copies of a thing. You could just send this electronic mail version of it.
And it's interesting. I wonder how that would work with my information guru. Today, I pick up the telephone, and 30 seconds later, I have my answer. He has to have the computer, right? Like, I have to have the computer to send it.
Right, and also it's entirely up to him. So I think that's one of the things. So there's a current thing that this technology uses called the Post Office Protocol, POP. And so POP is on version, I think, 2 or 3, and it's this very slow back and forth. Like, it's constantly going and checking, hey, do I have new messages on a central server? And then it shows them to you. And so an engineer in Stanford, Mark Crispin, has rolled out something called the Interim Message Access Protocol, IMAP, and he thinks that's going to help it be much faster, but you are still sort of dependent on your guru is at his computer. So one, is he like, when is he on his computer to see the message? He's not getting a phone call and going and just like answering the phone. He's got to know, he's got to go and check. It's like getting a piece of mail. He's got to go check the box on the street corner and get his mail. So it's probably going to slow some of those things down. It doesn't seem like email is going to make anything faster. If anything, maybe stuff, I don't know, maybe we don't. The 80s have been a very fast-paced, everything is bumping and grinding, and we're doing as much as we can as quickly as we can. Maybe email is a way to like slow things down and just, technically I don't need to spend the stamp postage and, drop it in the mail, and maybe I get a response faster than the actual postal letter that arrives. But I'm also not calling somebody up and having an immediate conversation. We're sort of taking it at our own pace.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too to see how these companies all come up with their own versions, right? Like, are we going to be able to have standards where I buy an Apple machine? Does that electronic mail, can that be opened on a compact? Like, how is that going to work?
Well, and I think that's why there's a thing called the Internet Engineering Task Force, the IETF. They just formed this year to try and answer those kinds of questions and try to come up with some actual standards and put out these, requests for comment. I think they're RFCs, and they're trying to sort of get everyone to agree what are those standards so that you can do that. But I don't see that happening. Like, it's already too different. You can't share files between your Apple Macintosh Plus and your Compaq whatever. The file systems are unique and proprietary. Of course they are. Corporations want to make money and want to get you into the systems. I'm good for them. I will applaud if they can get companies to agree to a standard way of doing it. But of course Apple and IBM and all of these companies have incentives to keep you on their technology. So I don't know why they would. I think this is why if you're a corporation and you have your $500,000 contract with IBM to put in a bunch of technology into your headquarters, who cares? Your emails are all going to the same place, and you don't have to worry about that. But as consumers, I don't know how that works.
Well, you got to hope at some point the government steps in to the private sector, right, and punishes those who don't play nice. Like, I mean,
Reagan's never going to do that. So
he's never going to.
We've only got 2 more years of Reagan sticking around, so maybe in '89 or something we can finally have somebody do that. But I think that's tricky, right? Like, the government's ability to regulate is different than the government's ability to, I don't know what word I'm looking for, instruct, right? Like, we have the FDA saying, here are the standards you have to meet, but no one tells the meat processing plant how to make sure that you don't end up with rat droppings in, your ground beef. The government is simply saying, we're going to measure you every, month and make sure that you aren't exceeding this. But the government's not putting in the actual protocol of how to do that. And technology is moving so quickly. Like, we're already up to a megabyte in RAM, and we weren't there just even 2 years ago. The new floppy disk, the new small little floppy disk, which isn't floppy, by the way. Why are we still calling it a floppy disk? It's this weird little hard piece of plastic. I don't love it. But that already is up to, like, I think 1.4 megabytes can fit onto one of those things now. The pace of this technology is going so much faster than some rule that Congress writes or regulation that an agency writes. I don't know how you have the government get in other than setting standards of, like, you all must do this, but this is the giant black box question.
Yeah, and the government agencies move so slow too. Like, it'll be interesting to see whether we we all have computers before the government agencies do, right?
I mean, you would kind of hope it would go the other way, that the government agencies would be some of the first to do that, but yeah.
Yeah, by the way, you don't need to worry about rat droppings in your beef because it's got Chernobyl radiation, so there you go.
Right, and just make sure that the dog food gives, you want a two-headed dog, not a three-headed dog. Three-headed dog, that's a little guarding the gates of hell. You just want the two-headed dog.
That's a hydration. Sorry, that was a little...
Oh my god, wow.
A little
Yep, sure.
three-headed Alsatian.
Yeah, Hydra.
Yeah.
Hydra's 8-headed, I believe, but that's fine.
Hydra is three-headed.
No, it's not. The Hydra.
Hydra is three, and every time you chop one off, it grows another one.
No.
Oh, I'm almost certain.
Man, if only I had a quick way to look this stuff up and I don't need to go get the encyclopedia.
Let me call my information guru, and I will let you know. And who's going to go type out the entire encyclopedia onto one of these computers, right? Like, how would you get the information? I mean, they're in books today, so how are we going to get that information? Is it somebody?
I mean, someone had to typeset it into the encyclopedia printed paper. So there is a room full of monkeys doing that and eventually recreating Shakespeare.
Does it fit? Is it going to fit? Like,
no, right? Yeah, the 712 floppy disks that you need to fit the Encyclopedia Britannica.
That's right.
Right?
That's a different.
I mean, although there is an argument that you have to have a ridiculously wide bookshelf in order to fit the Encyclopedia Britannica anyway.
Yeah.
So it is already it's already goofy. There's a reason you go to the library for that.
But I've seen the floppy disks. Like, they do not show as well. Like, you come to my house and you see my encyclopedias in my office. It feels regal, right? Like, people are like, he knows stuff. You see my floppy disks?
That'll be the next, home consumer, we've got the little fancy hutches to put in the, 22-inch TV and display the TV in the living room. We're going to have like a fancy little rotating disco ball that shows you all of your floppy disks.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a pretty interesting paper out there by a guy called Koji Kobayashi. I think I got his name correct. I think I said it correctly. Okay. And he's written an interesting paper that talks, it's computers and communication. So it's the perfect union of computers and communications, and he describes himself as a visionary, and he is. His credentials go way back. He's worked for the NEC Corporation for decades. Has been in a board position, president, chief executive officer there, and he's talking about. I mean, he's really taking it to the next level inside of his visions, right? Which is, and I don't even know what this means, but he's talking about the processing of digitalized information and exchanging information. And one of the examples he uses is, with this system in place, I can only gather he's talking about something as grandiose as the internet, probably even bigger. A caller in Washington can dial a party in Tokyo or Moscow, and the conversation will be automatically translated into Japanese or Russian on one side and into English on the other. Is this
Wait,
guy...
he's saying he can do this now?
No. He's he's proposing that, and I think he does actually remark in the writings that we're unlikely to reach the payoff point until the early in the next century. So he's talking about, like, in the 2000s, he's saying that we're going to have this grandiose sort of network and the ability to do things like make phone calls across the world, and I speak English, but my voice is translated on the other side to the destination language. Is this guy a dreamer, or is this where tech is heading?
I mean, one, we're assuming we make it into the new century because of nuclear war, nuclear power. And also, by the way, there's a book called Computers in Crisis, and they're pointing out that computers aren't ready to handle the year 2000. So actually, most computers are just going to break by the year 2000 unless we do some things to fix it. So it doesn't even matter if this guy's right that we can eventually do this kind of stuff.
So I got to survive Chernobyl, then a nuclear war, and then... the death of all computers because of 2000. So
yeah, and then we can eventually have computers auto-translating for us, which is cool. I love the idea, but I mean, I will say we already, so the part of that Compact Desk Pro that we were talking about earlier, it's called 386 because this company called Intel has released a new type of CPU, a computer chip that does a bunch of processing, and it's one of the first 32-bit CPUs, which apparently, like, I don't know enough about hardware side of the world, but 32 bits is the next amazing thing. So I'm assuming we're going to get to 64 and then 128, and then that's the way these computer things tend to double anyway. So who knows, by the year 2000 we're on like 512 CPUs and they're doing amazing things. It sounds cool and interesting. H.G. Wells back in the late 1800s predicted the credit card and a bunch of other things. So I like the idea of people, shooting their shot, stating a thing that they think is possible, and then like challenging people to rise to the occasion and actually do it. That's cool.
And I feel like I can call him Koji. I feel like if I knew him, he would would be okay with being on first name terms, so I'm going to call him Koji.
Sure. I'm going to call him Kobayashi because the Kobayashi Maru in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is the impossible test that you cannot pass. So I like the idea of that's... I'd have no idea if that's what the test is named after this guy, but it's a cool name.
Okay, I don't watch Star Trek. I'm a Star Wars guy because one is great and the other one is Star Trek.
For smart people. People.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
But he takes it further and he said, and I like this because it's super vague, free exchange, free exchange of ideas and international understanding. So how do this year's events play out differently in this super network, this internet, as you call it, right? How, like, now can I ping somebody in Chernobyl and be like, using my electronic mail, like, hey, what's going on over there? Like, what does this mean for communications? Like, do I need my information guru anymore, or do I have access to 15,000 new information gurus at the click of a button? Is that where we're going?
I mean, that'd be great, and I do think it's promising that Mir and some of the stuff that we've seen in terms of information sharing even through the Iron Curtain, it's promising, right? I do like that idea. I think my concern, as we sort of talked about earlier, is if anything, yes, the geopolitical situation is really tense, and I think there's going to constantly be roadblocks there. There's also just corporate incentives. Is Apple really going to let you talk in Russian to an IBM PC in Japan from the United States? Are you going to have to make sure that both of those two systems are Apple systems in order to use this amazing translation capability? I think he's advocating for that free exchange, but I am worried that you're going to have the Apple little text box is in blue and the IBM PC text box is in green, and it's not going to talk to one another. Like it's concerning that we're dependent on these companies, and maybe the IETF and international frameworks are going to make that more likely and more possible.
And does this also change the spy game? Does this mean now the government does get computers and all of a sudden we have a spy who's like able to say, yep, I'm sending things through electronic mail from the computers that I'm on, and spying is essentially something that takes 5 minutes instead of the old, I got to climb a wall and take pictures with my little flat tiny camera, and I got to escape the bad guys and get on a plane and get home, and now I've stolen secrets. Like you were talking about floppy disks earlier. Can I put information on a floppy disk and then mail that somewhere? Like how does security work in all of this? Like,
well, if anything, that's an argument for the USSR being on their version of an IBM PC and the US being on an Apple, and those two systems shouldn't talk to one another, so that a spy who is sitting at an Apple in a US, at the CIA in the US and sticks this floppy disk in there, it won't matter because the IBM PC of the Russian flavor over in Moscow can't read that floppy disk. There's an argument against international standardization to prevent that kind of stuff. And I think with the stakes of the Cold War, I bet a bunch of people would argue that we should never get to that future that I should be able to copy anything onto one of these floppy disks and take it to any system anywhere. There might be government pressure to go the other direction.
Well, it doesn't matter anyway because we're all going to be dead from Chernobyl, so...
Exactly. 3 Mile Island becomes 4 Mile Island when it grows a second head.
Existential dread.
Supposedly Mercedes-Benz claims that they've equipped a van that can drive itself. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. This is real sci-fi stuff. A self-driving car. So Mercedes-Benz took a van, and the guy, Ernst Dickmans, who is described as an oddball genius.
They always are.
Yeah, they always are. Former aerospace engineer who figured out trajectories as ships came through the atmosphere from orbit. So real genius. And what he's done is stuck a bunch of cameras and sensors and essentially a computer into a Mercedes-Benz van, and it drives by itself. And I don't know what the application would be. I mean, I can obviously think, that's great. The van is going to not drive me to work.
Right, like that's the thing I don't understand. Sure, it'd be nice to have, like, even the Jetsons' future, by the way. George Jetson drives his flying car.
His flying car.
Right.
Why do you need a driverless car? Where's the car going without me?
Now, there you go. You could have the car go pick up the groceries and then come back with the groceries.
Oh, that's interesting. So I just send my car like a little puppy dog.
Right.
Up it goes.
Right.
They load up the groceries, and then it comes back. It's like a delivery service. It's almost like a delivery service for your groceries, right? Except it's my car. send my car.
Right.
So, interesting.
That'd be great. But I think there's interesting, the subway technically has drivers of the subway cars in like New York and places that have subways, but that person's not really, I mean, no offense to the subway drivers, but they're not like steering. They're on fixed tracks. And so I'm trying to think of like, what are the situations where this supposedly driverless car, you're going to, is it making U-turns? Is it doing complex things? Or is it just shuttling you from like straight line point A to point B? At which point, just build a subway, build a train, build a thing that already does that thing. What's the benefit of this self-driving car?
Well, actually, what about if what about Cabby? What about so now I start to think about it, like all the services I use, maybe I'm getting a cab that has no Cabby, so I'm not paying the Cabby.
Good. So we're putting more people out of work. Technology continues to first we were putting artists out of work. Now we're putting cab drivers out of work. It's not I don't know why, for what benefit? Is it cheaper? Presumably, if every cab needs to afford one of these $6,500 computers, then how many cab fares does it need to go and get before it turns a profit? It makes sense to somebody.
That's really interesting, though, because now I'm taking the driverless car without the cabbie, and I'm putting in the computer, I'm putting in the encyclopedia, and now I'm able to ask the car questions while it's driving me to the airport.
Because that is what I love to do, is talk with the cabbie on the drive to the airport.
Sarcasm detected.
Well, that's the thing. Now you take the cabbie away, like.
Now it's informative, so now I'm getting a lecture. I'm getting a history lesson on the way to the airport.
But it's I'm able to ask it only things that I want to learn about.
I was the Star Trek nerd. You're sounding very Star Trek nerd right now.
Now I'm typing it in, like, hey, how many heads does a Hydra have?
It's Johnny Five in the driver's seat, giving you.
Is that where this all goes?
I wouldn't be mad at Johnny Five being my cab driver.
No,
actually, I
not
bet that
at all.
conversation would be pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if the information that you're talking about is stuff you care about. Like, that has promise. I mean, at first I look at it, I'm like, why would you want a driverless car? Like, it makes no sense. Every time I take my car, I'm going with it. But now if I'm in the car and I'm not driving, but there's no other driver, now it's test mix. Actually, now take it a step further. Do I need truck drivers anymore? Do we ever get to the point where trucks are driving
I will
themselves?
say semi-truck drivers are the worst drivers to deal with on the highway. Like, you guys are doing 60 and the speed limit's 50. What are you doing? It's insane. It's dangerous. So no, I'm maybe I'm okay with truck drivers. Actually, that's a good call out. I'm not a huge fan. Like we were just talking about, there's this opportunity for technology to all of a sudden we have all of these people who need to be your computer experts in the office. So it's bad that we're getting rid of the mail room, but it's good that we're hiring a bunch of computer experts. There's job at least equality. You might be trading I don't know that the person in the mailroom is going to become a computer expert. Maybe they can. Maybe there's training that they can take. But you're not losing a job. You're just replacing a job with a different type of job. I don't love the self-driving car. Like Johnny Five replacing a cab driver feels bad to me. Those cab drivers, they do a good job. There's nothing wrong with cab drivers today. It's a human who's earning a good living, doing something. I don't know why we would want to punish them and get rid of something for the sake of what? It's not going to be cheaper. You're going to be paying off that $6,500 compact that's driving the car. That's going to take 4 years.
Yeah, plus the cabbies also know the alternative routes, right? So
yes, that is true.
A driverless car is never going to know a shorter route or to avoid the traffic, or hey, it's 5:30 p.m. so I need to avoid the bridge.
Right.
The cabbie's going to know that. The self-driving car is not.
Exactly. Or like, you can just let me off at the corner of 43rd and 8th by going up 8th. You don't need to go all the way and loop around to take me down 43rd just to get me to the exact same corner spot. Like, yeah, no, a computer's just not going to know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is interesting stuff. So the future's bright, but do we see the George Jetson, all this cool tech? Do we see the next level? Like, how many years? Like, how fast is this thing? Is it just going to be this linear progress for the next 20, 30 years? And all of a sudden, we've been talking about expensive computers today, and it's like, finally in 30 years, I can afford one? Like, how does this progress?
There's a thing called Moore's Law, apparently, which is talking about the fact that all of these CPUs are getting faster, and they're like doubling in speed all the time. And so if that continues, then yeah, maybe there is what's double 386, 7, 8 something? Like maybe there's a world in which by 1990 we're all on 1,700 CPUs, and those are all blazingly fast. Maybe the Jetsons are up in the sky because in their world Chernobyl cooked the planet, so they have to live up in the sky. Maybe that's something that's coming to us sooner rather than later.
God, wouldn't it be interesting if it all came to pass, that That's why the Jetsons lived in the sky, because the Earth is
That's why
scorched
they're
from
up there.
Chernobyl.
Exactly. Listen, if I need to sacrifice the Earth to Chernobyl in order to get the little conveyor belt that takes me from bed through the shower, through the dressing room, and like fully does me up in like a little 30-second conveyor belt like Judy Jetson does every morning, that's great. Sign me up for that future. I want the conveyor belt that does all of that. So, assuming we survive Chernobyl, assuming Russia and the US don't bomb each other through nuclear war, assuming the year 2000 doesn't actually blow up all the computers like it seems like it's going to, we're going to be in a Jetsons future with self-driving Johnny Five cars. We are going to have encyclopedias on our home personal computers, and we're going to have like 10 or 15 TV channels for some reason.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And that's not enough to make you dizzy. There's a million other things we're probably not thinking about, like
Right.
education. Like, how's too young to be using these? I played video games. Like, I don't.
Right.
I still love going to the arcade and playing the arcade machines. But as these computer games become more popular, now do the kids have to have one? Like, does everybody get their own computer? Like, I find that hard to believe that everybody in the house would have a machine. Like, surely we'll only have one.
Where are you going to put it?
Where would you put like multiple machines? But
Right.
it's interesting.
Yeah, so it'll be the year 2004. We'll have survived the year 2000 apocalypse. We'll be doing amazing flying cars, and the Red Sox might actually win the World Series.
Oh, that would be something.
There you go. That'd be
Yeah.
nice. They could actually finally do it. Bring it all back to the start. All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. If you liked what you heard, maybe call your local radio station and tell them you can't wait to hear more. And if you didn't like what you heard, remember the name of the show is Coast to Coast with Art Bell. Also, tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check it out. Some of the best shows out there grow by word of mouth, and we'd much appreciate it. To read articles that we've written on similar topics to the ones we talk about here, head over to our internet site at acceptancepod.com. For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and my internet handle is at @KThomasEuland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Andrew Greener, and my internet handle is at Criteria Greener. That's GREINER. And this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.